Alright everybody, welcome back. It's been a long time since I've done actual data dives on the channel. I've just been kind of throwing up PDR sessions up on the channel, frankly, because it was easy. In fact, I had to go back and reinstall all my screen recording equipment to get this working. Now that I've got my hands on a C8, a lot of folks are asking for comparisons between the C8 and the C7. And I'll say this is probably really early to be doing a comparo. However, I figured I'd give my initial impressions and look at a little bit of data. So overall, I'm really happy with the C8. My car has what I will call a partial track alignment on it. I did it myself in the garage. It's close, frankly not quite exactly where I want it, but it was good enough to be able to go out and spend a day at the track last week up at Summit Point Raceway and try to get some laps in and get a feel for the car. And I was pretty right off the bat able to run consistently kind of mid and even some low 121s at Summit Point. Data showed really some 120s were easily within reach. I think as we look at the data, you'll see some things that probably I could be doing differently. Overall impressions of the car, I'll say that you could definitely feel the weight behind you at initial turn-in. Like you can just feel that mass start to move. And the car is probably a touch loose at turn-in. I mean, that could just be that I'm just not used to having that mass behind me instead of in front of me, but it feels like it's quick to turn in. Mid-corner, it was really pretty stable, steady state. And then, you can just hammer the gas coming out of the turn, and frankly, the car puts down power really well. And does understeer under power. So we'll see some of that in the data as well, where you can get the power early, but the car will start to understeer, and sometimes you have to modulate the power just to kind of get a little bit of front end grip coming out of the corner. So as far as comparing it to the C7, the best comparison I have here is my 2019 Grand Sport on Super Sports. So the C8, when I took it to the track last week, was bone stock except for the alignment and the requisite 2 quarts of additional transmission fluid and flushing the brake fluid. So stock pads, stock Michelin Pilot Sport 4 tires. This data I have is some old data from my C7 Grand Sport, and it is on this factory Super Sports. So I actually ended up running 4 days on those tires, and I still have tread on them. I still have those tires sitting on a set of wheels in the basement, in fact. But this was probably the closest kind of stock to stock I could do. It's worth pointing out, though, that the C7 Grand Sport wasn't stock at this point from a suspension perspective. When I bought that car, I had every intention of turning it into a track car, and so before it ever turned a wheel on track, it had actually the Z06 FE7 springs and bars on it. It had a DSC Sport controller. It had DSC Sport tractive shocks on it. It had monoball bearings instead of rubber bushings. So it was already a highly modified car from a suspension perspective. And right off the bat, my first day with it on track, the best I was able to muster was right around a mid 121, so very comparable to the C8. The data we're going to look at today, though, is actually from the 4th day I had with the car, and my best ever on the Super Sports with the Grand Sport was a 119.7, and that's actually what we're going to compare to right now. Again, it's probably not a totally fair comparison, but it'll give you something to look at. It's also worth noting from an ambience perspective. When I took the C8 out last week, it was probably mid-upper 80s, whereas the temperature for this C7 run was kind of mid-60s. So the C7, frankly, it was kind of about ideal conditions for the car on that day. So, we're going to look at the fastest lap here, and what we're seeing is the blue line is the Grand Sport, the red line is the C8. Down here you can see the difference in the P8, the PDR video themselves. Right here we're looking at a couple of different measures: throttle, brake, speed trace. This is actually how the delta in lap time is changing through the lap, and this is the actual delta in the lap time through the lap. So right off the bat, you can see coming down the front straight here, it actually was, the C7 was a good bit faster going down the front straight. Now, you did see there was a little bit of traffic there. There was a Miata. Didn't really hold me up, didn't really cause me to lift. So clearly I just got a better run at a turn 10 coming onto the front straight. You can also see, again here I'm lifting quite a bit early on the C8. I'm still getting used to that car. But it was, a bit below on speed here as we come into the braking zone for turn 1. So about a 4 mile an hour difference. Under braking, you can see they're very similar. In fact, we can zoom in on that a little bit. You can see they're very similar. Probably worth noting, let's see, what's the actual rate of the speed channels. Here it's 10 hertz on the C7, and on the C8, okay, it's also 10 hertz. So it's interesting to see these fluctuations. That's probably from the ABS working under braking. But right here you can see, frankly, this was probably as much driver as anything, but I am overslowing considerably more in the C8 than in the C7. So remains to be seen with some more time whether I can get that back. Some of that is just because of the way it handles and my comfort level with it, but you can see that when we go back to gas here, let's see, both cars are at full throttle in one. There's a huge speed gap just because I overslowed the C8. In fact, it's a 10 mile an hour speed difference. So if you scroll through the lap, what you can see is the C8 is gradually gaining on it under acceleration. In fact, here you can see this is the 3/4 shift. There's a manual transmission in the C7. The C8 closes in tremendously because of that very quick DCT. And by the time we lift, again I'm lifting earlier here in the C8, the speed difference, which was 10 miles an hour, is now less than a mile an hour, actually less than half a mile an hour. So the car definitely accelerates well, definitely puts power down well. And as we go ahead and we approach turn 3, we start to brake. You can actually see in the C8 here, I'm carrying a little bit more speed going in, which is great, but then again I overslow as we turn into turn 3 here at Summit Point. It's probably worth noting this was my fastest lap in the C8. It also was with a passenger in the car. So I think actually I was trying to not overdrive the car because I had a passenger, which actually helped me out from a lap time perspective. But again, overslowed going into 3. And at this point the delta T between the laps is 0.17 seconds. And we go through turn 3. Again, you can see I had to do a little bit of a lift here coming out of 3. That was again just to get the front end to bite a bit under power. Whereas the C7, once I ramped up and I was full throttle, I was staying full throttle until it was time to shift. And again, a good speed difference here just because of that higher minimum speed going through turn 3. And you can see again the C8 is kind of closing up as we go. Again, from a driver perspective, you're just going to see the same thing throughout the lap. I lifted earlier in the C8. I'm braking a little longer in the C8. The min speeds through turn 4, they're closer than they were. But again, you can see this blip of full throttle here going down the chute to turn 5. But in the braking zone, I'm actually rolling a lot more speed down towards the apex of turn 5 at Summit Point. Now, here again, it's interesting. Different techniques. The track's changed some. You can even just see the curbing's changed. What I was finding with the C8 was I had to be really careful under trail braking or else the back end would want to come around. So as you can see, here I'm doing, braking and turning and then, getting back on the throttle sooner in the C7. Whereas in the C8, I was still trying to figure out, how much I could slow the car. I was carrying more speed in here and I was slowing longer, and it took me longer to get back to throttle as well. So again, this is just, one of those things hopefully that will improve with more experience with the car. Same thing here on the turn in to turn 6. Again, just really overslowed that turn in. I think some of it was just a lack of front end grip. turning into turn 6. And here we start going around the carousel. I'm going to zoom back out a bit so you can see. Oops, and right through here is as we're going around the carousel. So again, started out much slower with the initial turn into turn 6. Was able to close up the speed, adding gas through the carousel. Had to lift off a bit to again tuck the car in, and then started to make the left to 7. And again here what you'll see is turn 9. So turn 9 is again a fast right-hander, leads up the hill. It's one of those things where, you know, I'm adding gas, and the front end is starting to wash as I add throttle. So I've kind of got to, you know, modulate the throttle a little bit until I'm pretty much at track exit and I'm going straight, and then I can mash the gas in the C8. So again, you see the acceleration closing the speed gap from the much higher kind of minimum speed through turn 9 here up through 10. And then again, I lift a little earlier, broke a little more in the C8. It's probably worth noting, if you've seen my other videos, I'm a little tentative through 10 right now after stuffing my C7 in the tire wall there. And here we have the braking zone for turn 10. I actually tried to roll more speed through 10 here as opposed to in the C7, but that actually hurt me because going back to the throttle in turn 10, again, the car wants to wash out. The front end wants to wash out, so I'm having to kind of modulate the gas until I'm sure I can get the car pointed where I want it to get to, heading down the front straight. So, you know, a lot of this is probably fixable with just some more seat time in the car. I think some alignment changes, some ride height changes will help this as well, but you know, the bottom line is the cars are very comparable even with a modified GS compared to the C8. And for me, the real like win with the C8 is the way that car puts down power and the way that transmission works. There's just nothing to think about. I just leave it in drive, and you can just stand on the gas and it will go, and you can pretty much point the front end with the throttle pedal. So hope you enjoy it. I'm going to do another video here shortly to talk about some differences with the PDR and C8, and I'll also put together an actual side-by-side lap of the two cars. Have a good day.